But, there's a little bit of terror involved in it, right? Because, you're getting an adrenaline dump and you don't realize it until afterwards. Like, I was a uniformed police officer with a gun telling this guy to stop, and he's not stopping. He's running and he's reaching for his waistband.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Life is often difficult, and the world is a broad place.
We do our best to manage our own battles and try not to get involved in every fight that we're invited to join.
Looking out for number one is a primary goal that is taught to us from a very early age.
What if managing our lives the best way requires reaching out to those in need?
Helping them along their path, using our resources and guidance.
Bearing the weight of some of their burden so they can focus on the fight in front of them.
While contributing to recovery of those in need, you allow space for recovery in yourself.
Your spirits get lifted by knowing that you contributed to the betterment of humanity.
So now two people are healing
instead of just one. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, and now you can join. Ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and don't forget to follow us on all social media so you can find out exactly what we're up to. On today's episode, we welcome somebody who I've been waiting to get in here for a really long time, and that's Bill Mazur, to discuss the suffering of others. Bill, thank you so much for coming in.
Appreciate it, man. You guys are doing great stuff, and it's truly an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're all about mental health and everything, and you're right up our alley, so this is going to be a lot of fun.
The funny thing is your story, you had 25 years or however long you did on the job, and it doesn't even scratch the surface of the stuff you're doing now. Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor, and that's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust them, so if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com. Now, Bill, each week we grab a question from our audience. This was a real easy one. This was a no-brainer for me. It says, it's from Rotterdam 50. So I'm assuming it's a cop. Why do you help others? This seems to be a profession that's well fitted for you, but there's got to be a reason behind it. Nobody just wakes up one day and says, you know what, I want to help others. There's got to be a backstory.
I think it's really about mission and purpose, right? There's this great book out there called The Why Cafe. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a short read. If any of your listeners are looking for a good short book, it's a good one. They talk about a PFE. PFE stands for purpose for existing. And, when you get a taste of being a helping professional, like you were as police officers, like I was, there's something special about that. And then when you get into a profession like this, where, people are coming to you in their darkest hour and they're looking for guidance and you can provide them with a resource or their family with a resource, that's right there. There's no higher gratification you could have, in my opinion, anyway, than helping somebody in that particular kind of scenario. So its purpose, its mission, its purpose for existing.
One of the things I talk about in the beginning is how, we're taught from a very early age, you got to look out for number one. You got to look out for number one.
And don't step in number two.
But in reality, is it really working that way? Where if you give and you take what you've learned throughout your life and you give to others and help them along their journey, maybe that's the way. I don't know.
You do have to pay attention to self-care. You have to pay attention to regulating your own emotional state, because you couldn't be the best version of you, this is not like a fairy tale kind of, guru kind of thing. It's real, in my opinion, because if you aren't taking care of self, and there's a lot of facets to that. It's physical self-care, it's emotional self-care, it's nutrition, it's all these things. If you're not paying attention to that, and no one's perfect at it, by the way, but if you're not paying attention to it, your fuse will burn out quickly.
How many times we had this conversation about first responders generally don't take care of themselves.
No, they're the worst at it.
You got a lot of heavy set people, and they're out there trying to help others. How could you help someone else if you're not mentally and physically helping yourself?
Well, think about one of the first things they taught us in the police academy. It's when you're responding to a call, you're no good to anybody if you don't get there safely.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's the concept. Mike, what do you think?
Well, you know what? I mean, being around sports our whole lives, we've always had people that helped us. You know, coaches help you along. You know, your parents always help you along. It's almost a way of giving back to all the people that helped you at some point in your life. And we would have never got here on our own if we didn't have people that helped us. So to me, it's really just an idea of giving back to the people that helped us.
Helping people is it's got so many different facets to it, but its basic core is it's good for your soul. It really is good for your soul. When Mike walked into therapy, I had been gone from my shooting for a year, and Mike walked into therapy. I saw him, and I knew Mike, but I didn't know him. And I remember looking at him, and we connected. We just started talking. I gave him my phone. He gave me my phone number. I was like, all right, let's talk. And we did talk, and I found something that I felt better. All right, I still wasn't okay, but I felt better that I was able to give what I learned through my experiences to somebody else. And I thought a lot about this question today. And listen, I got a little advantage over both of you. I've seen this question already, so I had some time to think about it. And I came to this conclusion that I have this belief inside my head, as misguided as it might sound, that if I save enough people, then maybe I'll be able to save myself. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's how I feel. Because I am not, by far, I'm not a perfect person. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you right now, I'm definitely not. But I feel this internal need to go out and just save people. I don't know if that's what drew me to be a cop or not.
You just feel it's an easier way of getting to heaven.
Listen, I'll hedge my bet on that one anytime I can. So Rotterdam 5.0, that was a good one. Thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air.
We could have had a whole show just on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, this is why Billy is so important to come in here, because
Absolutely.
The core of our show is to help people to overcome adversity, to overcome suffering, to run towards the prairie fire. And it is right up your alley. We reconnected. So we were at a Blue Magazine event. Let me give a little backstory for everybody. We're at a Blue Magazine event, and I still have some friends that are police officers in South Jersey, and when Josh Vidal was shot in the head, I followed that story very closely. Josh is a wonderful person with probably the most messed up sense of humor I've ever heard in my life, but I love him dearly, and I love his resiliency on it. So immediately when I walked into the place, I recognized Josh. No, the big scar on his head.
It's a dead giveaway.
It's a dead giveaway. But I recognized him. And then you're standing right next to him. I remember right where we were. We were at the Brownstone. And we start talking, and we realized that you and I have all the same friends. We know all the same people. We went to the same high school together. We didn't know each other in high school. I knew who you were, but you were older than me, and you're not going to pay attention to a piece of dirt freshman. You weren't. It's life. But you and I remember, talked most of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's Pat Applegate doing? What's Brian Pierce doing? It was so nice. And I went home, and I remember talking to my wife going, you're never going to believe this. This is the most fortuitous meeting I've ever had in my life. And it was cool. It was really cool.
No coincidences, right? Not in this business.
No.
When something like that happens, we say, of course. Of course it was supposed to happen like that, right?
I believe you're putting us in a place for a reason, or put in a position for a reason. You know, and maybe it was a chance meeting, but maybe it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, oddly enough, we had a guy who went to St. Augustine Prep, where both two people I know traded Holy Spirit for St. Augustine Prep to go coach there, two Holy Spirit guys, and I'm going to say their names just in case they do listen. It's Mark Reardon and Charlie Roman. But we're starting to get a little South Jersey action in here. I love it. That means Philly fans. And
Eagles fans too?
Flyers
Of
fans.
course. Of course.
Yeah. I'll be down there. I'll be in Citizens Bank on September 10th.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you have money?
No, they got their own court downstairs. We're good.
Mark and Charlie, by the way, were two incredible athletes, and they basically had fire hydrants for heads. I mean, they could hit like a ton of bricks. So that's a compliment.
Mark Reardon playing middle linebacker, and listen, Mark used to be over my house all summer playing wiffle ball. Like Mark went to Lafayette, and then he coached. So he was
Villanova.
He coached. He went to
He coached at Villanova.
He coached at Villanova. That's what it was. He went to Lafayette, coached at Villanova, and then got the head job at St. Augustine. And then Charlie got the head job at Holy Spirit, and then went over to St. Augustine because there was some, I don't know what it is. I don't follow the politics down there. But you grew up in Atlantic City?
Correct.
Yeah, where did you grow up?
So a little bit more towards Ventnor. I know you know where that is, next town over. You know,
It was just
Beach,
a knife and fork.
Yeah, there you go. Beach Town, next town adjacent to that kind of borders, Atlantic City. They call it Lower Chelsea now. But yeah, grew up there. My family's roots go back, I mean, gosh, this is worth mentioning, over 100 years on both sides. There's a street named after my grandmother in Atlantic City.
And that's before Atlantic City was Atlantic City.
Oh, yeah.
That was before the casinos and all that.
Yeah. You're talking, early 1900s. There's that history. My father, 100% Ukrainian. He grew up in the inlet, like last street in Atlantic City, Main Avenue.
Well, the inlet's not the inlet no more.
I know.
Gardner's Basin. Let's call it Gardner's Basin now. So.
Yeah, but right around there. So that was sort of the like Ukrainian Polish area. And then my mother was, an Italian. She grew up around St. Michael's, Texas Avenue, Florida Avenue, around there. So, yeah. So there's a street between Texas and Bellevue. Bellevue is kind of like a smaller, like half street, and so it's Texas and Bellevue, and there's alleys that go in between there, and they were all like little homes, little row homes. It was formerly Camerata Terrace, and now it's Ann Bunting Lane. That's my grandmother, my mom's mom.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah,
because I heard
across from Star of the Sea.
Yeah, well, I heard Angeloni's. I was just down there. Angeloni's is closing. It's one of my favorite Italian restaurants, and I know exactly where that is. Yeah. Walk right past it.
So that's sort of the history there. And born and raised there, youngest of 6 kids, come from a blue collar family. I think I mentioned this to you before. My father did 40 years on the job in Atlantic City.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 40 years on the job. My brother was on the job as well too. So. My whole family, 6 kids, like I said, sort of the typical Brady bunch, 3 boys, 3 girls kind of deal. I'm the youngest. And we all went into some sort of public service. So my eldest brother and I went into law enforcement. I have 2 sisters that were nurses, a brother who's an orthopedic surgeon, and another sister who was a teacher. So we all went into some sort of helping profession, if you would.
You're like the Marzaks.
Yeah. Great family.
Great family. So Marzaks, remember I told you Joe Paterno came to my high school to recruit somebody? It was Pete. Pete was my age, but all the kids were ultra successful. Joe is a Superior Court judge. Stosh is the preeminent hand surgeon.
Stosh went to medical school with my brother. He's good friends with him. I'm friends with Joe. I went to school with Ann. Ann was in my class. They're great people.
They are good people.
Yeah.
And the old man was a coach at Holy Spirit High School forever. But you have strong ties to that community.
Yeah.
But back in the day, what year did you get hired by Atlantic City?
92.
92. So back in the day, I remember in the 80s, Atlantic City was one of the higher paying departments in the area. And you got a job. You were set pretty well with Atlantic City PD, but you had to know somebody to get in. Obviously, you fit right in. Yeah. Did your dad push you into it, or is this something that you just wanted to do?
No. I always identified with like the good guys, seeing my dad, come home in a 3/4 length leather jacket with a nightstick. I mean, it was back, those days, come home with his buddies who were cycle cops with
the old drop down holsters.
Yeah. I mean, we identified with the good guys. So that always sort of, I idolized that, growing up as a kid. But truthfully, when I went into college, my early sort of, intentions were to graduate, get my bachelor's degree, and apply to the bureau, the FBI, and maybe even law school. That was like sort of the path that I was looking at. I even thought about like going into the military because like special forces, I read a book when I was in high school. I don't know if you ever heard of it, Point Man. It's about Navy SEALs. It's, it's one of those classic books. So I was having these thoughts of doing something like that, to really challenge myself or whatever. I graduated from Holy Spirit, went to Temple University. I was there for my freshman and sophomore year. And my sophomore summer, a bunch of my friends, people that I knew, said the police test was coming up in Atlantic City and they were going to take it. And they were like, man, you should just take it. And I was like, I'm going to do the college thing and then, see what happens after that. And they were like, man, you got to take the test. And then my brother decided to take the test as well. And so I'm like, I'm just going to take the test. And I told my parents, they weren't angry, but they were like, why are you doing that? You need to stay in school because everyone, education was a priority in our family.
In 92, it was a big deal. You had to.
Yeah.
Or in the late 80s, early 90s, you had to go to college.
But in 92, you didn't need a college degree to get into law enforcement.
Oh, no.
either. Yeah.
No, just a high school degree, actually.
Well, if you were anything like me, I never had aspirations to become a police officer. I sort of was in the right place at the right time, like we talked about earlier. And it sounds like that's kind of, this opportunity presented itself to you, and you don't turn down opportunities.
Exactly. So, long story short, took the test. I did well on it. I scored in the top 20. And I think at that time, 600 or 700 people took the test. Like Kevin said, you wanted to get on the job there because there's, it was great pay. It was a larger department, a lot of lateral movement. You could do cool stuff. There was a lot of things to do in the agency, and so a lot of people wanted to get on the job. Anyhow, I took the test. I did really well, and there was like a hiring blitz. They were ready to hire like that. They sent us a letter after the results came out, which were immediate. Hey, we're starting background investigations, and I'm like,
wow, this is real.
Yeah, this was the summer going into junior year. So now I'm like, what do I do here, right? So my friend's like, you're crazy if you don't take this job. People are killing to get in this agency. And there were so many, cool things and opportunities you had.
In 92, I mean, Atlantic City was booming. You had the Taj was being built. It was probably done construction in 92.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It was somewhere around.
Because I remember it put a lot of my friends' parents out of business. Because they weren't getting paid on it and stuff like that.
Wasn't there one house in Atlantic City where the person wouldn't sell and they built a casino right around the house?
Oh, yeah, it was right around the corner from my grandmother's house. Yes, you know her.
It was on Pacific Avenue, right? Yeah. So
I remember that story, but I didn't know if it was a true story or not.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's not still there, right?
No.
They got rid of it.
Yeah,
they finally offered enough money. It just sold.
But I remember, obviously some of the guys we went to high school with, all their parents either worked in Atlantic City or they were union workers in Atlantic City or cops in Atlantic City. And I used to hear the stories coming out of there, but a lot of iron workers. And some of the iron worker stories were pretty brutal. And
the casinos were paying really well. So in the early days, right before I came on, like in the 80s and stuff, casino gaming came in like the 70, 78 or 79.
77,
77
resorts,
yeah. Yeah, you're right, 77. They were paying really well. I mean, what a dealer was making back then was probably double what a cop was making. There's actually several people who left the police department and went and worked in the casinos. Some of them came back, but others just left the profession and went and worked because that was a lot of money. I mean, making six figures in the 80s, that's a big number. So by the time 92 came around, I got on the job and I saw the opportunity and I had at that point I had a pretty clear vision of what I wanted to do. I wanted to do street crimes, narcotics, eventually SWAT, that kind of stuff, the high speed stuff. And so I decided to stay. And
what did you get put into first out of the
Patrol.
Police Academy?
Patrol. Yeah. You go right into your FTO, your field training. And, back then it wasn't really it was not like a bona fide program. Where
they didn't have like you said, bona fide like FTO program. You drove with one of the older guys.
In 01, it wasn't even in my department.
If you're lucky to get an aggressive older guy, it was a good FTO program. If you got one of the old dinosaurs,
I was very lucky. I got some of the best cops in the department. That, when you're that young and you're impressionable. I mean, I went at 20 years old, graduated at 21. When you're that impressionable, like, and you get exposed to like guys who really, I mean, just incredible on the street. They know the people, they know the environment. They know, I mean, they just sniff it out.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty intense in Atlantic City. The FTO consisted of basically you had to do all three shifts, which was Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, which was day, evenings, 4 to 12, and then 12 to 8 overnights. And it's a different environment. It's in Atlantic City. It's weird. The day shift, there's a higher volume of calls, but they tend to be less serious, if you will.
Absolutely.
4 to 12 was a busy one.
Whether it be parking complaints, blocked driveways.
And I will bet you 4 to 12 was your favorite.
Oh, of course. That's
because I was 3 to 11. That was our shift, and that was my favorite. But my FTO listened to nothing but jazz music and turned the heat way up and expected me to stay. I think he did it on purpose.
Expect me
to stay awake.
Yeah.
He's like, come on, man. It's 90 degrees in this car, and you're listening to Chuck Mangione. Come on. It was god awful. But back then, I remember the conversation because I could overhear it. Is he ready? Yeah, he's good. Okay. You're no longer on FTO.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you made it through jazz and 90 degrees in a car.
Oh, it was awful.
You ready to go?
I think on my it was my first week. I don't know, maybe it was my second or third night. I was in a full pursuit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're there a week, and this is what it's like. Go get him.
So do you remember your first serious call? It was sort of like a wake-up call. You get out, and you're very idealistic when you get out of the academy. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this. But then you have your first real serious call. Was that it?
Well, I guess, that was the first real adrenaline dump that I had, that I was like, whoa. Like,
where you get back in the car and it's like, oh.
I'm a uniformed police officer. I'm in really good shape at this point. 21-year-old. I was, a competitive power lifter at that time. I just came out of the academy. I mean,
you're good.
You can do at 21 years old, right? So it was sheer joy on some level, but there's a little bit of terror involved in it, right? Because you're getting an adrenaline dump, and you don't realize it until afterwards. Like, I was a uniformed police officer with a gun telling this guy to stop, and he's not stopping. He's running, and he's reaching for his waistband. 3 days into the job. It doesn't dawn on you until after. I don't even think it dawned on me until I went home that night. I was, I grew up doing martial arts, so adrenaline dump was not foreign to me. However, in that context, that was an eye opener.
Well, we talk about it all the time. People say, like, were you ever scared when this happened? It's like, you didn't have time to be scared. You just reacted. You did what you got to do. And when you got back to the car, or like you said, when you got home, it was like, holy shit, what just happened?
Yeah.
Mine was real simple. It was a robbery out of a Best Buy, and we caught him up on 280. It was my second day on FTO, my second day. And it was back in the days when glove boxes used to magically open. We all know those days. And the glove box magically opens. Now, there's a difference between, I worked in Essex County, which was a little looser at the time, and the robbery happened in Morris County. I'll never forget the detective for the neighboring agency. The glove box magically opens, and he goes, "You did this stuff in Morris County, young man. Say in Essex County, you're going away for a long time." And that's exactly what he said. I'll never forget. I could still tell you the name of the detective who said it. But that was my wake-up call. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, my first shift on the road, there was a DOA. And, that is what it is. But this was like, okay, now this is serious. This is serious.
Mine was when I started off at the sheriff's department. I'm out on the road. I think I'm in the process division serving papers or whatever. And they give out a description of a car, and they let a cop on a pursuit and everything. And I'm sitting right by the highway, and all of a sudden, whoop, there goes the car. I'm like, here it is.
Yeah.
Chase his car all the way onto Route 80 into Patterson. And I'm like, I wound up losing the car. I got the plate and everything, lost the car. We wound up making an arrest later, but it was some scary shit when you're doing 90 miles an hour in and out of traffic.
Calling out 70 miles an hour, too.
Yeah.
So you've probably had some opportunity, especially with such a large department, to have that lateral, like you said, the lateral mobility. Any one detail stick out to you that you were assigned to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so from 96 to about 2000, I was assigned to the County Narcotics Task Force. So I spent 4 years detached from the department. They wanted young faces to do UC work. Me and another guy from ACPD were detailed out there. And that was a real education. I mean, from 93 to 96, 3 straight years on a busy shift in patrol, you certainly see a lot. You start to understand what the streets are and how to navigate them and how to deal with people. You're still a young guy at this point. But then I got this opportunity because they were looking, and we historically had a good relationship with the prosecutor's office. We would detail guys to major crimes, the Narcotics Task Force. So I had the good fortune of, a person or two were rotating out, and me and another young guy from my class were rotated in. And we didn't know how long it was going to be. It was going to be like a quasi, short-lived thing, maybe like 6 months to a year if things went well. And we wound up being there over 4 years. Things went extremely well, and I got an incredible education on the drug culture, which I thought I knew as a young guy.
Yeah.
I had no idea. It was just amazing. I just could not believe how prevalent the use and sales of drugs were. I mean, and it.
Come on, man. You went the Holy Spirit. You saw it there.
Yeah.
I know you saw it there.
Well, I'm saying it knows no socioeconomic boundaries. No. I mean, you're talking about,
high-level people,
wealthy people, right down to the street level and everything in between. And, I happen to have a couple of good informants at the time, people that I knew from the street. Whew, man, I got to see some incredible stuff and learn from some great people at the prosecutor's office. Back then we had, these were old time kind of narcotics guys. And so we got to go all over, went all over the county. We did UC stuff in other counties, other states. We got to work with the feds on a lot of cases. So those 4 years were, that put me, I would say, and this is no knock on the department, but by virtue of the assignment and the people I got to work with and the things I got to see, it put me lightheaded, light years ahead.
Put you on a different level.
Track, of my comprehension. Not that I was any better or any smarter than anybody, just the exposure that I had to things like, I knew how to write, a consensual, to wire somebody up. I knew how to write an affidavit. I wrote them all the time for search warrants. And so, you don't typically get to do those things when you're, just a street cop.
Joe
You get the vice guy. Yeah. So I got that education. I learned from some of the best. And I went in there not really knowing how to, shouldn't say not knowing, but I was not, very particularly, schooled on writing intricate reports and how to build probable cause on another level. I'm not talking about street stuff. I'm talking about, deep connection of dots. I learned it there, and it actually became a very strong point of mine later in my career because of that learning experience.
Now, you're somebody with so close ties to the community. You went to a regional high school pulling from people all different towns and stuff. I know we've all run into a point where you've had to lock up somebody somebody who you had a relationship with early on in your life or went to high school with, and you lock them up and they're like, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?"
Dated back in school.
Yeah, it's happened. And that feeling of, I got to do my job. Did you ever come across that?
Yeah, I did. It was drug stuff, unfortunately.
Well, believe it or not, in wealthier, I don't want to say the wealthier, but people who went to Holy Spirit were of a different economic range than, say, somebody, maybe most of the people that might went to Pleasantville or Atlantic City or somewhere like that. And people, believe it or not, there's money to buy the drugs, and the drugs were there. We all knew where they were. Mm-hmm. But so I know a lot of parents sent their kids to Holy Spirit to get them away from stuff, but it turns out it's everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And going back to that time, like 96 to 2000, we worked in a lot of the bars, and that was when the scene for like ecstasy and MDMA was blowing up. Yeah. It just came, like the club kids and all that sort of scene. That was, wow.
And that's like the rich man's drug. That's not like the little kids, the little corner kids or anything. This is affluent, kids of affluent people who have access to the money.
It was. In a lot of cases, it was. Yeah. And we had a couple pretty big cases with that, couple huge seizures of MDMA, ecstasy, ketamine at that time. But you nailed it. Yeah, sometimes you're doing these investigations and names pop up and you're like,
Jesus Christ.
That guy for 20 years. But, there's a line drawn.
You got to separate.
Yeah.
They go their way, you go your way, but it still affects you when you go home. How did you deal with it? Because you're seeing everything at such a rapid pace in your career. How did you go home and decompress? Was it your ride home? Were you still living in Atlantic City? Mm-hmm. So, that ride home for Mike and I was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Well, not Mike, because he lived 10 minutes away from the police department.
I've walked home.
Yeah.
My decompression time was walking home.
But that 15 minutes, from the time I left the department to the time I got home, was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
I needed it.
Look, I'll be very honest with you. At that time, I was a young man, and I didn't have the know-how, the skills, the knowledge on how to do that. But what I did have, and I didn't know this until I reflected back on it, was, a good foundation of family and sports and fitness and martial arts and taking care of myself. And like I said, it's not like I consciously said to myself when I was a 20-something-year-old, hey, I'm going to do these things so I can balance out, the trauma and the stress of what's going on in the job. Honestly, it wasn't really a thought. I just did it. Reflecting back, it's 100% why I was able to function after doing that.
I always say the gym saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Because that was your aggression release. That was, go there, whether, like for me, it was running. Mm-hmm. I'd go out there and run, and it would just clear my head, and I'd be fine the next day.
But you saw it around you, though.